Alright everybody, today we're going to be going over how to make a selection object. Now this might be a 2-3 part series because we're going to be adding user interface options that are going to open and close. We're going to add object selection, so have a little option that goes over the top of our game object that shows that we have that one selected, or as in like towers you have the detection radius, stuff like that. But in this video we're going to be going over the pure basics and how to implement it on each object and get it to show up and designate what object has been selected to our game. We're going to first start by going in here and creating some folders. Scripts folder, and a sprites folder. And then I'm going to have you download the sprites and all the assets that we're going to be using for this project. We're also going to have a complete package description with the entire project completed, so if you do not want to do this and just go straight to part 2, you can absolutely do that from right now. So pause the video and download that and then come on back. So we're going to open up this, get our basic tower, drag and drop that into our sprites. Then we're going to open up our sprites and drag and drop that into our scene. Now it is very small. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go into our inspector, click on our basic tower, and we want to change our pixels per unit. And I'm going to go to 16 because that seems to be a pretty good size. And it is a little blurry, so we're going to change the filtering mode to a point. I'm going to apply that, and that sharpened it up. Now we're going to create an empty game object, and this is going to be our level manager. And now your level manager will have a lot of different things, and one of them that I like to have it on is the object selection, so I can know where to find it. What object is selected in our game scene. And now we want to go into our scripts, and we want to create 2 normal C# scripts. So we're going to call that our tower. And we're going to make this the selected object. And then I'm also going to create another folder in here called interface. And as much as like people don't know when to use interfaces, when not to use interfaces, I like using them on objects that I know I'm going to be needing a certain method in them. With the tower, we're going to be using the on click or on mouse down. But I don't ever want to remember that. I just want to know that when I have a selectable object, I want to be able to have the methods already there for me, and I just have to implement them. So we're going to do a C# script, and this one's going to be called I for interface and selectable. And this one's going to be a very short script, so we're going to do this one first. So open up Visual Studio. Okay. So now that we have our I selectable script open, we're going to delete all those. We don't want to inherit from auto-develop, and we don't want any inheritance whatsoever. We want to change our class to an interface. So that means we do not need any methods in here, other than the method that we want to implement. So this would be our mouse clicking object. So we're going to have a void on mouse down, and that's all we're going to have. So what this does is basically allows me to implement it onto my tower. So for our tower, we're going to add a little comma, I selectable. And this is going to bring up an error. And that's because I have not implemented the method that's in the interface. So implement the interface, and it creates our method for the on-mouse down. And has an error on it that'll make it so it has not been implemented. So we're going to delete that because I'm going to be implementing it. Happens when we click the object. Okay. And now we're going to go into our selected object. And we want to have a private game object because we want it to be able to get our game object. We're going to call this selected object. We're going to serialize this. That way we can see it in the inspector, at least while we're using it. So we do not need our start and our update method, but we need a method that's public. We don't need to return anything. Select object. And then we're going to give it a game object. And now this is when you have everything that you want it to do. So we could have it open a user interface object, close UI object, could have it play a sound. So it's everything that's associated with our game object. And all the information that you can get from the selected object is already here. But what we want to do is we just want to have it notify us that it's selected. So we're going to do a selected object equals our object. That way we can see what we selected. And then we're going to notify ourselves in the inspector that we selected that object. So we're going to do selected object.name plus has been selected. Okay. And now we're probably wondering, how do we get that from in here? Because I would need a reference to our selected object. There is a couple of ways we can do this. So I could do find object of type selected object, and that'll be it. Or we could skip all the hassle of doing that every single time, every single script, and we can make our selected object have a singleton instance. And what a singleton instance is, an object that has reference to this object and this object only, and only allows one of those objects or one of these scripts to ever be in your program at any one time. So the way to do this is we want to do a public. That way everybody can access it. Static, and then we name it our script name. We're going to name it an instance. And now we need to make our singleton method. So this allows us to instantiate the instance. So we're going to make it private void singleton. And this is a little different in Unity than most other programmings because we have to destroy the game object and not the instance itself. So we're going to type if instance equals null. So if it doesn't equal anything, we want to make instance equal to this. And when I say this, this is this instance of the script. We're going to do an else if instance does not equal this, we want to destroy our game object. So it'll destroy the object that this is on. And I'll show you later on how this works. And then we want to add a void awake. And our awake function is a mono behavior function that is called before start and update. So this is what you want to do when you want to instantiate certain variables that are going to be used within other start functions, much like singletons. So we're going to type this and we're going to add our singleton method. Singleton. And now this should allow us to have the instance of our selected object on here. Alright, so we're going to test out our singleton. So we need to add a component to our level manager. Add one there. Then we need to create another object. We're going to call this test object. And we're going to make sure our singleton's working. So we want to add another selected object script to this one. And since we can only have one of these objects in our scene, one of them is going to be deleted. That is determined by the inner workings of MonoDevelop and which one loads first. We're hoping it's going to be our level manager, but we don't know. So let's push play. Level manager was destroyed, the test object stayed, and that is the problem that arises with singletons, because if you accidentally add something, and since we don't know which objects will be destroyed or how it is and what objects have the script on them, we're going to bring back our code and we're going to add something into our singleton method. We're going to add just a simple debug.log. We're going to call our GameObject.name a little message that tells us is going through singleton. Okay, so this allows us to see every object that has that singleton on it while we're running it. So let's test it out again. Test object is going through the singleton, so that's the first one that gets run, and the level manager is going through singleton. And now that we know that both of the objects are going through a singleton, we can change and figure out which one we actually want to keep. So I'm going to delete my test object. And now I know that only my level manager has the singleton. So my level manager is going through a singleton, and that's everything that happens. So now that we have our singleton working, we want to go back in our code. So on our mouse down, we want to go in here and we want to get reference to our selected object. Well, since it's a static object or a static variable within that class, we can access it from here. So we'll type in the name selected object.instance, and then we want to select the object. Select object, and we're going to send it towers game object. Now that we have reference to our selected object and sending it our game object, when we click, we need to have reference to two things that are needed to even have this be able to work. So we need a collider and we need a rigid body. So to do this, we're actually going to add them up here. And since my game is a 2D game, I'm going to add a required component. Rigid body 2D. And we need to add the word type of. And this converts it into from a keyword to a type. And then we also need to add another required component. Type of collider 2D. Now that we're back in Unity, we're going to go to our basic tower, and we're going to try to add our tower script to it. Now, adding the component failed because we need to add our box collider, capsule collider, or anything onto our tower. And that's because we made those required components within the script. So we're going to add a box collider 2D. And now let's try adding our tower. And as we can tell, we have our rigid body that's been automatically added. The reason why it doesn't add a box collider is because there's multiple different colliders that extend from the collider 2D, and it wants you to determine which one it's going to use. So now that we have our tower script, our rigid body, and our box collider, we want to change our rigid body to kinematic. And this just makes it so our tower doesn't move. So if we click play, the level manager went through the Singleton. We click, and the basic tower has been selected. So if we go to our level manager, it is now selected under basic tower. In part 2, we're going to have a box go around the tower indicating that our tower has been selected. We're also going to implement a little user interface box that gives some of the information about our tower. If we have any questions or comments or concerns, please leave them down in the comments below, and I will absolutely try to help you out.